that the happier a marriage, it seems to me that the quicker widows...
Maureen O'Sullivan, a star who needs no introduction, a woman who once lit up Hollywood with her classic beauty and natural charisma. From her early years at MGM to her place as the legendary Jane of the silver screen, Maureen O'Sullivan became a symbol of elegance, grace, and something truly extraordinary. But then, that light began to change. Maureen O'Sullivan's life turned in another direction, darker, more tragic. Then the tragedy began to knock. She lost her eldest son, she lost her first husband, and the large family that once made Hollywood admire her slowly revealed cracks that could not be repaired. The bad news spread like an undercurrent. Maureen O'Sullivan was forced to endure the most ruthless blows of fate. What really happened to Maureen O'Sullivan? What were those tragedies, and why did they make her life story so haunting? The answer lies in the darkest years of a woman who once captivated the world, and then had to learn how to keep living with loss. The journey to becoming a legendary Hollywood actress. Maureen O'Sullivan was born on May 17, 1911, in Boyle County, Roscommon, Ireland. Maureen O'Sullivan, also known by the name Maureen O'Sullivan, was the daughter of a major in the British Army. As a child, she moved to the United States with her family, where she later pursued her acting career. In 1930, Maureen O'Sullivan made her film debut in the movie Song of My Heart. Her natural talent and charisma quickly caught the attention of both audiences and industry professionals. Her breakthrough role came in 1932 when she was cast as Jane in the first Tarzan film, Tarzan the Amun, alongside Johnny Weiss Miller. The film was a huge success, and she continued to play the role in 5 more Tarzan films. Throughout her career, she appeared in more than 80 films, including classics such as The Thin Man, Anna Karenina, A Day at the Races, and Pride and Prejudice. She worked with famous directors such as George Cukor, Howard Hawks, and Sam Wood, and starred alongside actors like Clark Gable, Greta Garbo, and Katharine Hepburn. Maureen O'Sullivan's career lasted more than 5 decades, and she continued acting until she retired in 1980. Her final on-screen appearance was in the 1980 drama film Handover Street with Harrison Ford. Despite a successful career, the actress still had to face personal tragedy. A brief marriage. Maureen O'Sullivan's first marriage did not begin with peace, but with a very clear barrier. At that time, she was a prominent Hollywood face thanks to the Tarzan series, while John Farrow was a talented director and screenwriter whose personal life was already complicated. He had been married before, so for a devout Catholic like Maureen, marriage could not happen immediately. They had to wait for approval from the church before officially marrying in 1936. From there, Maureen's first marriage entered a phase that was both glamorous and burdensome. On the surface, it was a model Hollywood family. John was a powerful man in the industry. Maureen was a famous star. Together, they had 7 children: Michael Patrick Maya, John Charles Prudence, Stephanie, and Tisa. But the longer they stayed in that marriage, the more cracks appeared beneath the polished surface. John Farrow was later remembered as a man known for indulgence, heavy drinking, and infidelity. So this marriage was not a brief, impulsive romance, but a long chapter filled with responsibility, many children pressure, and also many things endured in silence. It did not end with a divorce filing. It ended in 1963 when John Farrow passed away, leaving Maureen both a widow and the mother of 7 children. Her second marriage was very different. After John's death, Maureen did not immediately enter a new relationship. She lived as a widow for nearly 2 decades. It was not until 1983 that she married James E. Cushing, a wealthy businessman and arts patron. If John Farrow represented a marriage overshadowed by fame, strong personality, and quiet fractures, then James Cushing represented a later chapter that was more private and stable. This marriage was not tied to major scandals, nor to having more children. It felt more like a safe harbor after a storm than another whirlwind. The two also worked together on stage projects and maintained that relationship until Maureen passed away in 1998. In short, Maureen had 2 marriages, but only the first was where she built a large family of 7 children, while the second felt like a late-life rest she received too late. And it was from that first marriage that the greatest tragedy of her life truly began. 7 children, 7 paths, and not a single path completely peaceful. 7 children, 7 stories never told. After Tarzan's New York adventure, Maureen O'Sullivan did not disappear, but she chose to step back. This was not an impulsive decision, but a clear shift in direction. She left the demanding pace of Hollywood to focus on her family. For many, it was a step back. For Maureen, it was stepping into the most important role of her life. Her 7 children with John Farrow were Michael Patrick, Mia John, Charles Prudence, Stephanie, and Tisa. And if you look closely, each of these children was not just a child, but a different piece that made up her life. Michael Damian Farrow, the eldest son, was the first anchor. For Maureen, Michael was not just her first child, but the one who opened the door to her role as a mother. In the early years of her marriage, Michael represented a newly formed family, a sense of stability that Hollywood could never provide. He grew up in a world where his mother was a star and his father a director, yet he lived relatively far from the spotlight. For Maureen, Michael was a reminder that real life always exists outside the film set. Patrick Villiers Farrow was a different story. If Michael represented the beginning, Patrick represented depth. Patrick did not clearly choose the entertainment path, but leaned toward sculpture and an independent creative life. Maureen saw in Patrick a personality that did not depend on Hollywood, a path that did not require the spotlight. To her, Patrick was proof that not every child had to enter their parents' world. Mia Farrow was a completely different story. Mia was the child who stepped straight into the light. From an early age, she showed ability and a distinct presence. When Mia became a film star, Maureen was not just a mother, but someone watching another version of herself. But what made it different was that Mia did not stop at acting. She became a humanitarian associated with UNICEF and global campaigns. For Maureen, Mia was not just the most famous child, but the one carrying the greatest public burden. Mia represented success, but also exposure. John Charles Villiers Farrow took a path the family could not control. While the other siblings could choose their own directions, John Charles represented the most difficult part of the family. For Maureen, he was not an easy child to understand. He was an example that not every child follows the expected trajectory. In this story, John Charles is not told as a victim, but as a major question mark in Maureen's journey as a mother. Prudence Farrow brought a completely different tone. She did not follow film, was not drawn into scandal, but stepped into the world of meditation, spirituality, and academia. Prudence became the inspiration for the song Dear Prudence by the Beatles. But more importantly, she lived a structured life separate from the chaos of Hollywood. For Maureen, Prudence was balance, a lighter part of life, showing that not everything falls into darkness. Stephanie Farrow was the most private. While Mia stood out and Tisa had a period of acting, Stephanie almost stayed out of public view. She had some roles, but did not build a major image. For Maureen, Stephanie was like the quiet in a noisy family, someone who did not need to prove anything, did not need to stand out, yet still existed as an essential part. Tisa Farrow was the child who embodied transformation. Tisa entered film, but later left to become a nurse. This was not a common choice in a Hollywood family. For Maureen, Tisa was the clearest proof that her children were not bound by fame. Tisa showed a practical path connected to life rather than image. Looking at all 7 children, the clearest thing was not who succeeded more, but that each represented a different kind of life. Michael was the beginning. Patrick was depth. Mia was light and pressure. John Charles was the difficult question. Prudence was balance. Stephanie was silence. Tisa was transition. And for Maureen, motherhood was not about controlling outcomes, but witnessing each child follow their own path. The most important point here is that Maureen's tragedy did not lie in having failed children, but in the fact that each child carried a different kind of challenge. There was no single pattern, no identical ending. And that very difference made this family story heavier than any scandal. But before the audience could see this family unravel over time, Maureen had already taken the first blow, then the second, only a few years apart. Loss upon loss, from her eldest son to her first husband. In 1958, the family portrait of Maureen O'Sullivan began to crack in a way that could not be repaired. At that time, the public could still look at her as an old Hollywood icon, a woman who had once had a major career, a large family, and a husband famous in the film industry. But behind that surface, the first blow came in a way that was painfully real and cold. Michael, her eldest son, died in a plane crash at just 19 years old. That one event alone was enough to completely change the rhythm of that household. Her firstborn was not just the first child she gave birth to, but also the marker that opened her role as a mother. The child tied to the early years of her marriage, to the feeling that a family was being built little by little. When Michael died, it was not just the loss of a son. It was the loss of the opening chapter of an entire lifetime of motherhood. From that moment on, the image of a large Hollywood family was no longer intact. On the outside, Maureen was still the Maureen audiences had once known, but on the inside, the balance had shifted. That pain did not play out on a red carpet. There were no lights, no soundtrack. It unfolded the way all real tragedies do in life, quietly, but with enough force to throw the entire structure of a family off-center. And the cruel part was that Maureen did not have much time to stand still with that shock. Just 5 years later, she suffered the second blow. In 1963, John Farrow died suddenly of heart disease. His death brought an end to a marriage that had lasted nearly 27 years, a marriage already heavy with conflict, responsibility, silence, and the weight of family. But at that point, the private issues between husband and wife were no longer the main focus. What remained was a very simple truth. Maureen became a widow, and she had to stand in a house that still held 6 children. This is when the story of her life took on a completely different weight. Before that, she had been a movie star, the wife of a major director, the mother of a famous family. After John's death, everything narrowed down to one far more practical mission: keeping the family standing. What makes this period worth talking about is not that it was overly dramatic, but that it was painfully ordinary. The same woman the whole world once remembered as Tarzan's Jane now had to face 2 truths, with nothing glamorous about them: losing her eldest son, then losing her husband. No scandal weighs more than things like that. No role could carry her through it. This was the chapter of life that forced Maureen to step fully away from the image of a movie star and become the one holding the family together in the middle of an enormous emptiness. The important question is whether Maureen collapsed after those 2 blows. And maybe it was exactly at that point, the point that seemed lowest, that she began to change. Not loudly, not with any declaration, not by disappearing. She moved forward in her own way, slowly but steadily, with a different posture. And what matters is that Maureen did not disappear. After those shocks, she came back. The journey to win back the throne. After the shock of losing John Farrow in 1963, many people might have assumed Maureen O'Sullivan would retreat completely into the shadows. That would have been understandable. She was no longer the youthful face of the Tarzan years. Hollywood at that point was changing fast. A star who had come out of the black and white era and was also carrying the weight of family could easily be seen as someone from a bygone time. But Maureen refused to end that way. She did not try to cling to youth. She did not try to chase new trends, but chose a smarter direction, returning through serious acting. After becoming a widow, Maureen shifted strongly toward the stage and television. This was a major turning point because it proved she was not living off old glory. The stage demands a different kind of strength. There is no editing, no camera angle to rescue an actor, no layer of nostalgia wrapping around it, the way old movies are often remembered by audiences. There, an actor has to stand on pure ability, and Maureen did stand. The play, Never Too Late, became a memorable milestone during this period. It showed that she was not some classic symbol being displayed again for appearances, but an actress who still had rhythm, still had strength, still had the ability to command a stage. From there, Maureen's return did not happen in the form of one explosive comeback followed by silence. It felt more like a quiet but persistent reclaiming. She moved through Broadway, then television, then film in her later years, and each stage made one thing very clear to the audience: Maureen O'Sullivan was not trapped in one era. That is the point many people overlook when they think about classic stars. They are often remembered for their single most famous role, then permanently boxed into that image. Maureen was different. She began in the golden era of MGM, survived the changes of the studio system, then continued working in a far more modern Hollywood. That alone was a rare form of endurance. What made this comeback valuable was not the number of roles, but the way she appeared at the right time, in the right place, and always carried the qualities of someone who had lived through an entire era of cinema. She did not need to compete for roles with younger actors. She also did not need to create scandal to be remembered. Maureen returned through professional credibility, through the steady hand of someone who understood exactly what she was still capable of doing. It was the kind of comeback that stayed quiet but carried weight. It did not create a box office frenzy, but it created something far harder: lasting respect. One very beautiful moment in the final chapter of her career was when Maureen appeared with her daughter, Mia Farrow, in Hannah and Her Sisters. This is a priceless detail in any story about her because it carries stronger symbolism than any description could. In real life, Maureen was Mia's mother. On screen, she also stepped into the acting space of her daughter's generation. That image feels like a bridge between two eras. On one side is classic Hollywood with its elegance, discipline, and old depth. On the other side is a more modern cinema, sharper, colder, more complex. And Maureen stood right in the middle, not out of place, not awkward. She did not appear simply to decorate memory. She appeared as proof that an artistic legacy can be passed from mother to daughter without losing its dignity. The honors she received late in life made that even clearer. Maureen had a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She also received the George Eastman Award for her long-term contributions to cinema. This was her true throne, not the throne of box office numbers or youth, but the throne of professional honor. After all the personal upheavals, the years of stepping back for family, then the steady returns, Maureen still held her place in screen history. But just when the story seemed to have reached the bright side, Maureen's life came to a stop with a very unexpected ending: the sudden passing. On June 23, 1998, Maureen O'Sullivan died in Scottsdale, Arizona at the age of 87. If you only look at that short newsline, you might think this was an ending prepared long in advance, gentle and almost in keeping with age. But in reality, her passing carried a much more sudden quality. Common sources usually list the cause as complications following heart surgery, and that detail alone is enough to show that this was not an ending that came peacefully in sleep, but a medical crisis that happened while the family was probably still hoping everything would be fine. What makes this story notable lies in the specific events before she died. According to Mia Farrow later on, Maureen was hospitalized to undergo carotid artery surgery. The first surgery was reportedly successful. For a family that had already lived through so many major and minor events, that must have felt like a sign that everyone could relax for a while. But then things changed direction very quickly. 3 days later, she had to undergo a second surgery. And it was after that second procedure that Maureen went into heart failure and died. Looking back, this is the kind of situation that is very hard for a family to accept, because it does not resemble a long decline that gives everyone time to prepare emotionally. It feels like a door closing faster than expected. The way Maureen died also creates a very strange paradox in the story of her life. This was a woman who had lived through more than half a century of Hollywood, who had gone from the black and white era into the age of modern cinema, who had gone through fame, marriage, loss, then returned to the stage and screen with the posture of a resilient artist. She had endured the shock of losing her eldest son, then losing her first husband, then continued being a mother and actress, a face that survived more changes than most stars of her time. And yet, after all those great upheavals, what ended her life was not a scandal, not a traffic accident, not even a long public collapse. It came from a surgery that at the moment she entered the hospital, no one thought would become a final goodbye. That is why Maureen O'Sullivan's death is both brief on paper and unfinished in the feeling it leaves behind when viewed through the journey of her real life. A woman who had lived through so many years that seemed like the harshest imaginable did not stop in the middle of some giant storm, but in a hospital after a medical turn that her family probably believed she could still overcome. That is what gives her passing weight without needing too much retelling. It reminds people that some lives look very steady, very long, very layered, yet the ending still arrives in a way that is quieter and faster than anyone predicts. But death did not end the name Maureen O'Sullivan, because her image had already remained too deeply rooted in popular culture. Influence in popular culture. If you had to sum up Maureen O'Sullivan in a single image, it would have to be Jane. Not just Jane from one film, but the most iconic Jane on the silver screen. At a time when cinema was still shaping how audiences imagined adventure stories, Maureen helped create a version of Jane that was soft, strong, and modern enough to endure across generations. The important thing is that image did not fade with time. It was replayed, remembered, and became a standard that later versions have struggled to fully replace. This is not short-term fame. This is the kind that defines an icon. But if the story stopped at Tarzan, then Maureen's story would only be half complete. She was also one of the first Irish actresses to make a clear impact in Hollywood during a period when the industry was still highly closed off. Her move from Ireland to the United States, then becoming part of the MGM system, was not just a personal journey, but also a marker of the shifting landscape of cinema at the time. Her career stretched from the early 1930s all the way into the 1990s, meaning she lived through the studio system, the decline of that system, and then into a completely different Hollywood. Very few actors managed to survive that many changes without being boxed in. Because of that, Maureen was not just a star of the past, she was a bridge. One end was classic Hollywood with its disciplined production rhythm, polished imagery, and strict star management system. The other end was modern cinema, where everything became more flexible, more personal, and also more complex. When Maureen continued appearing in later projects, what audiences saw was not just an older actress returning, but a piece of history still present. Her influence, therefore, does not exist on a single level. Today, the public remembers her in many different ways. Some remember her as Jane, the symbol of Tarzan. Some remember her as a face of classic Hollywood, representing an era when cinema had a very distinct style. Others know her through Mia Farrow as the mother behind one of the most controversial personal stories in Hollywood. And some see her as the center of a family that was both glamorous and filled with cracks that could not be hidden. What matters is that all of these layers exist at the same time. None completely overrides the others. Maureen was not defined by just one role, nor was she erased by family turmoil. She exists as a layered figure where fame, career, and personal life are intertwined. And that is what lifts her story beyond gossip. It is no longer just the story of a star, but the story of how a person moves through multiple eras, multiple roles, multiple upheavals, and still holds a place in public memory. There is a question here worth thinking about. When you think of Maureen O'Sullivan, what comes to mind first? Is it Jane on the screen? Is it an actress who lived through multiple eras? Or is it a mother who witnessed too many upheavals within her own family? There is no single correct answer because each perspective reflects a different part of who she was. And maybe that fragmentation is exactly what creates her true influence. Because in the end, what makes this story haunting is not Maureen's glory, but the price her family had to pay. Maureen O'Sullivan was not the kind of star who collapsed because of personal scandal. She did not disappear because of controversy, nor was she destroyed by her own choices. The greatest tragedy of her life lies in the fact that a woman who had famed beauty, a large family, and a clear cinematic legacy still could not protect her family from the very real forces of life. The death of Michael, the passing of Patrick, the case involving John Charles, the controversies surrounding Mia, or the long silences of the other children, none of these happened all at once, but they accumulated into a story that no one could fully control. If you have made it this far, let me know among Maureen's 7 children which story made you think the most. And in your opinion, what was the hardest thing for her? Losing a child, losing her first husband, or watching her family change in ways that could not be reversed over time. If you enjoy layered classic Hollywood stories like this, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next videos. Because some legends do not die on screen, they slowly fade in the very thing they love most, their family.
This content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Thoughtfully compiled from public archives, historical records, and classic articles. While we strive for accuracy and balanced storytelling, some details from Hollywood's golden age remain unconfirmed and should be treated as speculative. We encourage viewers to draw their own independent conclusions. If this journey through Hollywood's shadows resonated with you, please leave a gentle like and subscribe with the bell icon so you never miss our next chapter. To continue uncovering the forgotten tragedies of the Golden Age, simply select the video on your screen right now. Thank you for keeping their memories alive.